presentation I want to share with you guys today is the world has changed, have schools, okay? And Lynn gave me some talking points. I've used some of those and some of my own. I've been teaching 9 years, okay? So I'll get that out of the boat because some people will talk to me and say, you look like you're 17. I get that all the time. And this is just kind of a little bit about me, my email, my Twitter handle, which I will talk about, as well as my blog, which Lynn did mention, and some of the various hats that I wear. I teach social studies, I teach language arts, I have 2 children at home, I have a kindergartner and a preschooler, so I'm just getting into that other side of education from a parental standpoint, and what a different world that is. Okay, those of you that have kids know exactly what I'm talking about. I blog, I coach basketball and track. I love still building Legos. Yes, I do. I still play basketball. I'm a team leader. I'm an athletic director. I wear a lot of hats. What does that mean? Not very much, okay? The most important thing what I do is the time I actually have with kids. And everything I'm going to share with you today and talk to you about comes from my experience. It may not work for you. I hope something does. As we go to anything, you have somebody talk to you, hope to bring one thing back to your classroom. Or as an administrator, one thing to your building. And if you can bring one thing, if hopefully beyond just that was an entertaining little video clip, then maybe I have done something good. The first area that I want to talk about is student motivation. Okay, how do we get kids to do what we want them to do? First and foremost, you can never get a kid to do anything they don't want to do. You've probably learned that. You get into a power struggle, it's not going to happen. So the question that we always ask ourselves is, how do we compete? And this is an image that actually my brother, who had all of the artistic ability in my family, drew for me. When a kid is at home, they're inundated with Xbox, with iPads, with all these devices and things. And they're engaged. You know this. Your own children, if you have children. And they come to school, and what do we ask them to do? Sit in a desk by themselves, take notes, fill in bubbles that will ultimately dictate their entire plan in life. And we wonder why kids unplug when they come to school. Okay? Now, am I suggesting that we entertain our kids every second they're in our buildings? Well, in some regards, yes. And in some regards, no. Because we want to make sure that we can somehow connect these two worlds. And it becomes harder and harder every single day. You think about video games, and there's a big movement in video games in schools right now. Think about the amount of thought process that goes through a kid's head when they're playing a video game and how quick it happens. How many of you have a small child at home that already knows how to unlock your iPhone or turn your iPad on? I remember the day that I walked downstairs, my kindergartner, who at the time was 5, was on my wife's iPad watching YouTube clips. He had figured out how to get to the PBS clips. And I kind of went, holy cow. This is both amazing and scary at the same time, okay? So how do we bridge these two worlds? Because schools are no longer the places where kids are learning, or not the only place that kids are learning. Kids have access to information at their fingertips any second of the day. If they have a smartphone, they can learn more than you can probably get to them in a 45-minute class period in a few clicks of their phone. Okay, so what does that mean for us? How do we engage these kids? How do we motivate them? And that's our question we're going to look at. What motivates students? And because I'm, junior high, I always look at, well, what doesn't motivate kids? Let's start with that, okay? And the first thing I go into is grades. Don't motivate kids. If you think they do, you're lying to yourself, okay? And typically, when I start with this one off because I can read the room, who's nodding their head and who's, I'm not going to make eye contact with them because I strongly disagree. That kid wants that A. Do they want that A because it instills them a love of learning? No. They want that A because it'll get mom and dad off their back. They want that A, or in some cases when I coach, I want to get that D so I can keep playing basketball. Do grades instill a love for learning? Does it motivate kids to learn? No. Okay? Very few kids it will. All right? And we'll get into grades and what they stand for in a little bit. But grades don't, and there's a lot of research. I strongly urge you to look at work by Alfie Kohn or Mitra, who we'll look at in a minute. But grades don't motivate kids, okay? Punishments don't motivate kids. And yet we punish our kids like crazy in school. You didn't turn that assignment in on time. What am I going to do to you? I'm going to take 50% off. Does that motivate that kid? No, I'm just not going to do it at all. I'm already at an F. Why am I going to do it? Okay? Now, with this being said, are there times where punishments and consequences have a place? Of course. Okay, when you're talking about the safety of other kids in your building, you're talking about the safety in your classroom, of course, consequences and punishments do have a place. But when you're talking about motivating kids, punishments never work, okay? And I will tell you, my first couple years of teaching, I punished the heck out of my kids because that's the way I was taught. And I think most of us in here teach the way we were taught because that's just what we know. And I had the fortune or misfortune, I don't know, but my 4th year, they moved me into a classroom because we had so many teachers when I first started. A lot of us had to teach on carts. So I had my entire life, I was like, that guy walking around the street with a like a shopping cart. That was me. All of my books, my computer, into the various 7 different classrooms I taught in over the course of a day. And when I finally got my room, I was like, yes, I finally have a classroom. These bulletin boards and all that fun stuff. And then the next door neighbor was our BD program. So these are the kids that very regularly you'll see a chair fly into the hallway, literally fly into the hallway. And your kids in my class became very used to, uh-oh, there goes so-and-so, let's go close the door. We can hear them cursing and screaming and yelling, okay? And so through that very close relationship, whether I wanted it or not, a lot about this whole idea of punishments, okay? And I'll talk more about the whole relationship building and what goes on with that, but punishments don't motivate kids. You think that they're a deterrent? Well, there's all sorts of research about what actually deters kids or deters human beings from doing things. And punishment's not one of those things. And then the next one, and this is another one, even as an athlete, through high school, through college, and as a coach, this is a tough one for me to swallow. Anybody in here coach? Okay, or were athletes at some point in your life? Okay, I had an older brother and a younger brother, and I knew I got better at basketball by getting my butt kicked by my older brother and competing with him, right? We all agree to that. But competition only works if it's a fair competition. Meaning, if I'm going to go play basketball against Derrick Rose, am I going to get any better? Probably not, because he is that much better than me. Okay? When you think about a math class, I'm going to pick on math a lot today, I apologize. Okay? Think about a math class. We tell those kids to go up to the board and they compete in math races. It's only going to work if the kids are on the same playing field or have a chance of winning. If a kid knows they don't have a chance of succeeding, are they going to compete? They're not. And that's not just an athletic thing, that's a life thing. If you are going to do something and you know you can't win, are you going to do it? No. Now, I'm all for pushing kids, I'm all for helping them push themselves. But if you put kids in an unfair competition, is that going to motivate them? No. And most of our kids have been set up in our system for failure because they're put in classes with peers that are way above them or way below, and yet what do we want them all to do? Be at the same place. We need high expectations for each kid, but that doesn't mean the bar is in the same spot for each kid. And we put them up for this competitive nature against each other, what's going to happen? Well, Wall Street taught us what happened. The DC schools taught us what happens. We cheat. Look at professional athletes, baseball. You get too competitive and you don't feel like you can compete, you're going to find a way to succeed, and oftentimes we end up in cheating. And there's been a lot of cases around this country of schools doing just that. And that's a very big problem that we can't get into today. Okay? So what motivates kids? Well, I have a couple things that I have found in my experience that motivates kids. First one is collaboration. Working together. Okay? Now, as a junior high teacher, group work is a scary entity. Because you're going to always think of, well, I'm going to have that one kid, he's going to do all the work. And I was always that kid that sat as the freeloader, as I call them. I'm going to let Joey do the work because we're all going to get the same grade, right? You've experienced this, okay? And I was doing some research, and there's this theory out there called hole in the wall. And I'll give you a quick background on it. There was this, he's a doctor, kind of a philanthropist. He's in London, but he was working in India, in the slums of India, okay? And he created these things called holes in the wall. They were ATM machine style kiosks. Has anybody heard of this? Oh, good. Okay. And he put a computer in these kiosks that had internet access, and they were open and free to the public. Okay? And then he watched what was happening at these kiosks, and what he was witnessing was kids would go, and they would go to this computer, and of course, all of us, myself included, when I started reading this, I said, okay, so they're going there and looking at inappropriate, content on the internet. They're not going to use this for anything positive. And what he was finding was groups of 3 and 4 of these kids. Now, these kids have nothing. This is the lowest end of the social status in India. And they were teaching themselves things. And these things started happening where kids were teaching themselves English. In one case, a girl taught herself basic biology and eventually anatomy, went on to become a doctor. Okay? And what he found, though, and this is back to this whole collaboration idea, is that when kids were in a group and his magic number was 4. How he got to that number, I have no idea. He just pulled it out as 4, okay? That when kids were in a group of 4, they actually learned more than when they were by themselves because of the conversation that they would have. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I don't believe that. I'm a skeptic. That's how I do things. So the woman I was teaching with, a team teacher who was phenomenal, we're sitting there and I was telling her about this and she said the same thing. That's a load of garbage. You put 4 kids at a table in my room and one of them's doing the work and the other 3 are getting a free pass. I said, well then let's try this. So that's what we did. And it was a pain. It was great. So we did our own hole in the wall kind of action research. Okay, so I'm going to kind of explain it to you very basic. I teach to a mastery grading model. I don't grade kids on points. I do standards-based grading. So I look at the standards that we have and if a kid can reach that. Okay, and I'll get into the grading in a little bit. But this is something that we developed. We said, all right, can you turn the standard into a question? Can you create questions out of that standard? How do you find your information and what's your end product? Okay, with each standard. And so we were in the particular unit that we were in was India. That was totally coincidence that it was India and we were looking at this guy from okay. And so what we did is I said, all right, Joey, you're going to do the first standard. There were 3 standards. It just worked out perfectly. It was like divine intervention. The first standard, Joey, you're working by yourself. You're going to go through this process of this learning track by yourself. Susie and Mary, you're going to work as a pair. And then you 4, you're going to work in a group of 4. Okay, for the first standard. So they went through, they took their notes, they gathered the information, created some sort of a product, whether it was a picture. I give them all kinds of options. Write an essay, make a PowerPoint, all that kind of stuff. And then we went to the second standard. That kid who was by himself now worked as a partner. The kid who was partners worked as a 4 were now 1s. You see where I'm going with this? Third one. So that by the end of those 3 standards, each kid had to experience each of those 3 settings. Okay? And then came the hard part, the color coding of the Excel spreadsheet. So they took the test. And you can see the various content strands. Caste system, religion, Ashoka. He was an Indian emperor. And then the golden age of India. And the caste system was my control group where I did whole class instruction. Okay, so I wrote the test and it was completely aligned to these standards. But before kids answered each question, there was another question. It said, okay, when you did the work for this standard, were you by yourself, or were you in a group of 2 or a group of 4? Okay, so I tabulated the data and here's the 2 things I discovered. First of all, in all of those 3 cases where they worked on their own or with a partner or with a group, they outperformed when I whole class instructed. Okay, so that tells me 2 things. I'm a bad teacher, first of all, and kids learn better when they're directing their learning. Okay, we are very good at teachers as giving kids answers, but we need to be better about asking them questions and having them get the answers. Okay, we got to stop being like Google. We can't do that. The second thing I discovered was in every single one of the standards, the groups of 4 outperformed the pairs and the people who worked by themselves. Not just one kid in that group of 4, but every kid. And I went, oh geez, I just proved myself wrong. Okay, so Lauren and I, the person who I was teaching with, we started constructing more group work into what we were doing. And as a result, I don't believe in data driving all the decisions we make in our country, but we like to. My kids far outperformed other classes within the district on all the district assessments after that. Okay? Is that the be-all end-all? No. Did it work for me? Yes. So I firmly believe that when you put kids in a collaborative environment, they're going to learn more. Think about yourselves as professionals. The best learning I have had is talking to another professional. Talking to another teacher, what's going on in your class? Talk to me about it. I can learn from that. Even if I disagree with everything you're saying, you learn from that. Okay, and I don't think we do that enough as a profession, but I'll get into that. Okay, so the next thing that I feel motivates kids is relationships. And in talking, it sounds like you guys are very good in this district, nurturing the whole child, teaching to the whole child. In this next little video clip I'm going to share with you I hope it doesn't bother anybody, but we'll see here if it'll load. It might not load, but I'm going to tell you what happens. You're probably looking at this. Any PE teachers in the room? Gym teachers? Okay, what game are we playing here? Okay, that kid took a dodgeball to the face. Okay, in case there was any misunderstanding about that. The administrators in the room instantly say, why in the world are you throwing balls at kids' faces? The teachers in the room are saying, I got a couple kids in mind. Okay? The reason I show this is for two reasons. One, yes, we do have a dodgeball. We don't call it dodgeball because you're not allowed to. It's called bombardment. Yes? Okay? And they're very soft balls. You know, when I was in school, we used those rubber kickballs. When you got hit, it left a mark. And you were proud of that mark all day. Yeah, see, that was a senior in high school right there. Okay? So this, you know, and I actually just spoke with the mom on the phone the other day of the young man there. Hey, do you mind if I use that clip of your son getting hit? Oh, yeah, go ahead. And there's a couple of my colleagues. And what was happening was we did a fundraiser. We have an intramural, so the kids are not forced to do this. You don't turn your homework in? Okay, no. This is an intramural kids choose. And I will tell you, we have a lot of intramurals. Something like 20. We have 700 kids in our building. There are days when there's 200 kids in that gym playing dodgeball in the morning. Okay? Oh, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what about that little 6th grader, that 8th grader is going to pick on? No, it doesn't happen. It levels the playing field. And teachers go in. And let me tell you, I've taken some hits. Okay? We have some 8th grade boys that are in that track to be, you know, Division I baseball players. And I still remember the time, the kid's name, David, he squared me up. And this was before I was wearing glasses. And it was like the perfect right across the nose, snap the glasses in half, little cut. That kid still tells that story. Okay? But what do these opportunities present us? No, this is not the last message of corporal punishment. That's not what this is. But it's about relationship building. When I walk into class on the first day of school and I ask kids to do something, they're going to do it because they don't know any better and because they're scared 6th graders. But you try to ask a kid to do something in February, some kids start checking out. But I will tell you, the kids that I connect with the most are the kids that I do these types of things with. You build a relationship, and I strongly believe you learn about a kid before you can teach a student. And what I mean by that is that this kid right here, when this teacher asks him to do something in his class, he's no longer just that teacher that's always asking him and harping on him. He's now that cool guy that threw a ball at his face. This is a very drastic example, okay? But I hope you understand what I'm trying to tell you, is that a lot of times, yes, there is a fine line, and there have been plenty of people in the news to have crossed that line, okay? And I respect that. And they say, don't be friends with your students. I'm not saying you need to be BFFs, as my kids say, but you need to have a relationship beyond just a teacher and a student. If you don't, yeah, some of your kids are going to listen to you, but not all of them. And you know those kids in your classrooms that don't. And it's all about finding that hook. For this kid, it was playing dodgeball with him before school. For some kids, it's just sitting there and listening to him complain about how bad their parents are. Whatever it is, you have to do it. And that motivates kids to work for you. When I ask these kids that I'm throwing balls at and they're throwing at me in the morning to do something, guess what? I don't get any flack. They do it. They do it, okay? And those of you that have built relationships with kids, you know. And you know those kids you don't have those relationships with. If you're in a different grade level and you ask a kid to do something, they don't know you. They're far less likely to comply with whatever you're asking them to do. And then the last kind of area that I see a great deal of motivation for students is choice. Too often we ask our kids to sit in rows and do exactly what we tell them. I want you to read this book and turn in a book report. And it must be 5 paragraphs. It must have this many of these, that, and the other thing. And the heading must be in this font, 12 font. Okay. And that's going to work for what? About 20% of your kids? The rest are going to be trying to hold back their distaste for that assignment in a very polite way until you leave the room, and they're going to talk all about it. Okay? And I'm going to explain something that we did last year. Anybody familiar with the work of Daniel Pink? He's a businessman who has, I highly suggest you to Google him. And specifically, he has this video that I would have shown, but I don't think I'll have enough time. And he wrote a book called Drive. And in this book, he looks at what human beings. Instantly we think of money or other sort of extrinsic motivators. And all the research he did said, actually, that's not true. When people feel invested in what they're doing, they're motivated. Just why merit-based pay in education doesn't make sense. We as teachers are not motivated by money. We are motivated by those children in the seats getting it. Those children growing up to be successful human beings. You can't put a price tag on that. But our government's still going to try, okay? And so what Pink looked at is, okay, so why do certain companies succeed? And the one company he referenced was FedEx. And FedEx has this thing called, they call them FedEx Days. kind of works. And 20% of an employee within FedEx, their day is to do whatever they want, okay? So they told their employees, you have this day to do whatever you want. Think creatively to solve a problem within our organization, to think of a new idea, whatever you want. At the end of the day, you have to share what you've done, but that's the only stipulation we put on it. And there was more innovative ideas and positive changes in that company that came out of those 20% times than any other time of their work days. Google did the same thing. 20% of your job at Google when you're an employee there is to spend time thinking innovatively, thinking of new ways to do things. Okay, so a colleague of mine, a 7th grade teacher, said, what if we did that with kids? What if we gave them a whole day and said, do whatever you want? Well, junior high. Within reason. Do whatever you want. Learn about whatever you want. At the end of the day, show me what you've done. And I said, good luck with that. So we're on teams in our buildings. We have 3 teams at each grade level. So he did just his team. They did Innovation Day. There was about 100 kids. Okay, and I still remember walking out of my room and there was a girl doing a ballet dance in the hallway. And I went, this is out of the ordinary. What's going on here? I went and I asked. She was passionate about ballet, so she choreographed a dance for the day and then performed at the end of the day. Okay? And so I walked around, I saw some of these kids, what they're working on, and it was amazing. And he had a pretty rough group of kids. And you think, oh, behavior, those kids would be out of control. A whole day of nothing, no behavior issues. Why? Because they were clued in doing what they loved, what they were passionate about. So me, always wanted to outdo everybody. I said, well, let's try this as a grade level. And the hypocrisy of what we did is actually quite staggering. We looked at 300 kids, 6th grade. And we said, what if we did this as an entire grade? So we did that. And the best thing about it is we did it. We have ISAT testing. Yes. On a week, Tuesday through Friday. And because 6th grade doesn't do the writing anymore, state funding, they don't test on Friday, but 7th and 8th grade still testing. So while the 7th and 8th grade were still filling in those bubble sheets that are the most important thing in education, our 6th graders were locked into the LRC and did Innovation Day. So talk about the worst thing in education, and in my opinion, one of the best examples of learning in education. And these kids blew my mind. Okay, they were all over the place. I had kids writing stories. They wanted to grow up to be a writer. So this one girl spent an entire day and wrote a chapter book, or at least a good start on it. Okay, we had kids choreographing. I had kids making claymation videos. I had athletes in the gym making how to shoot a jump shot. And they even were doing the John Madden pen. We have tablet computers, so they're freeze framing. Now you see where the elbow is. And they loved it. Okay, and at the end of the day, this little girl, Nicole, she was a great kid. She said, Mr. Snowman, can we do this tomorrow? I said, well, it's Saturday. She goes, I would come back for that. Now, how many times do you do something in your class that a kid says, I'd come back on Saturday to do that? We are all great teachers, but that very seldom happens. Okay? So the question is, how can we do these things more often while still adhering to, hey, we've got curriculum we got to get through. We have standards we have to get these kids to. Okay? But how do we also not kill a love for learning? And I tell you what, right now, that was the most unfiltered example of learning I have seen in my 9 years. Okay? And since then, and when we get into, I thought I had a picture. I do. Okay? This was the slide we told the kids. Innovation Day, or Innovative Day is a day about student choice. Choose what you want to learn, choose your evidence, and share it. That was the only direction we gave them. Now, initially, the 6th graders went, what? They were kind of a little overwhelmed. But as we got into it, and we are in the process to Wednesday of this week, we are starting our 2nd year of this, and we're doing it again. And our administration is all over it. Okay? And what's kind of neat is Daniel Pink, the national New York Times bestselling author, contacted me because he had heard of this, wrote an article about it, okay, on his blog. And I was kind of like, okay, this is kind of a big deal now. And I have helped almost 20 schools around this country, one in Australia and a couple in England, to start their own innovation days. It's a simple concept, okay? And for whatever reason, it resonates with people. Hey, this is what learning should be. How can we make innovation days happen every day? Okay? But what I did is after this, I was so frustrated that I have to go back into the box. Okay? And so what I did is I decided to break the box down. I took my learning targets, my learning standards I had for our 3rd trimester of language arts, and I said, kids, here's the standards. What do you want to do? Each kid wrote their own learning plan for the rest 12 weeks of school. Each kid said, you know what, this is the literacy standard of identifying theme. Mr. Stump, I would like to create a book club with my 3 friends. We're going to read this book, and we're going to look at these learning standards. Can you come and meet with us on these days? I was like a dentist, actually. I had this huge chart with the calendar of the rest of the year, and kids signed up for appointments with me. I'd like to meet with you in my book club. We're going to talk about this standard. Or can you do a small group lesson for us because we don't really understand theme. Can you help us with that? Sure. And so I was checked out, like a library book, you know, essentially, meeting with kids. It was amazing. Okay, and if you ask my kids, which all these reporters did after I won this award, they will all tell you that was the greatest part about last year, is because they got to choose what books they read, they got to choose who they worked with. It was amazing. So how can we do this on a regular basis? I will tell you, those kids were motivated. Those kids were motivated. Where am I going next? Technology. Okay. Kind of the, I could talk for 4 days on this, but I'm not going to. Okay. And there's really 2 different areas we're looking at. Teacher use, student use. Okay. Now, we are all over the gambit. You know, in my district, we have a smartboard in every classroom. And it's a complete waste of money. Why? Because in most classrooms, they're no different than the chalkboard that was there in 1920. Okay? And I know there are classrooms that have 1 computer and that's it. You know, I'm very fortunate. I wrote a grant. I have 15 laptops in my room. They don't leave my room. Unless I really like the person, I'll let them borrow them. Okay? We've been very, very fortunate. But I'll get into that. Hold on. So let's look at student use first. When you look at student use, I could show you a billion examples of different web tools that are out there. But you know, a lot of times I share tools and then I get a teacher, I'll go back to their school and then I'll get an email saying, I loved that tool, but it's blocked at my district. Okay, and I don't know what kind of filtering you guys have in your school. And it's happened to me. I'll go to a conference. How many of you heard of Wordle? Okay, Wordle's no good. You guys got to move on to Tagxito. Have you heard of Tagxito? Okay, Tagxito is great. I'll make you a list when I'm done. And essentially what that website is, and we have time, I'll show you some of these. It's a word cloud. Kids can take and I've used it in language arts. It looks nice. Well, that's not the only reason I use it. I'll have kids copy their entire paper and paste it into this word cloud generator, okay? And the way this program works is the more times a word is used in that selection of text, the bigger it is, okay? So I have kids put their research papers in there, and they see how many times they've overused a word, okay? When we were looking at some of the State of the Union address that President Obama had, we put that into a word cloud. Gee, he really uses that word a lot. Or Secretary Duncan. And it's a really neat tool to see what are people focusing on and how many times they use the same word over and over and over. But student use really comes down to the choice and the options you can provide a kid. Okay, I wrote an entire series of blog posts on the cure for the book report because I teach language arts. Now, is that saying the book report has no value in education? That's exactly what, no, it's not. Okay, but we have to provide options. All right, now I'm going to show you a 2-minute clip because as I was thinking about how I would explain this, I had to do a video of myself, so this is going to be weird. You're going to watch a video of me as I'm standing in the room. Last year, one of the professional organizations I'm a part of is the International Society of Technology Educators, or ISTE. And they have a big conference every year, and it's phenomenal. My head feels like it's going to explode every year when I leave there. And one of the things that they recognize as young educators, I'm young, and so we had to submit a 2-minute video on how we use technology in our classrooms and what we feel technology's role in education is. So I thought, why don't I just play that? That'd be a lot easier than trying to make something up. So, and it's possible that I look even younger in this because it was last year. And we'll see if it'll load here for a second. And you will see. We'll see if it goes here. Technology. And the kids always ask, yes, I have a lightsaber in my desk.
Like this lightsaber is a tool. And in the right hands, we
be an incredibly powerful tool that has positive benefits on both students learning and teaching. One of the benefits of using technology and the positive that it has on teaching and learning is through the connectedness and the ability to collaborate and share with those not in your classroom. Whether it's my students connecting with a classroom here from Pennsylvania on the other side of the country, or myself as a teacher connecting with my professional learning network on Twitter to share ideas, share resources. Technology allows us to collaborate and share in a way that was not possible by breaking down walls and connecting people in all walks of life and all parts of the world. Another huge benefit, another positive impact that technology can have is technology allows you to no longer be confined to the four walls of your classroom. You can now bring your classroom out into the world and bring the world into your classroom. And you can see things and do things in a way that were before not possible. And technology makes those things possible. Technology is also amazing in the way that it can create a truly differentiated learning experience and teaching experience through the just innumerable resources that are available, whether it's various software, various tools, pieces of technology, devices, Web 2.0 applications. There is just so much out there. And what that allows you to do is to tailor it to both your teaching style, to your students' learning style, and it gives you that choice that is truly a powerful motivator in both teaching and learning. You can take control of what you're doing. Technology allows you to do that, give you those options. Technology is just a tool, a magnificent tool, and if wielded properly, can have more positive benefits for students and teachers, that it can truly be a game changer. It is a game changer in education today. Okay, so those are a couple samples of things that I've used in my class. Okay, so one you saw there was Skype. How many of you, are you guys allowed to use Skype here? Yes? Okay. Because we weren't until last year when I complained loud enough and got it unblocked. My 6th grade class you saw there, they were actually presenting to a 2nd grade class in Pennsylvania. Okay, because we were doing research papers on, as we call it, old dead people. Presidents. And this class in Pennsylvania, the 2nd graders were learning about Abraham Lincoln, which our school is named after, so they were sharing their understanding of these presidents and what they'd done with these 2nd graders. What a unique tool. Okay? Yet you saw a lot of me floating in the middle of nowhere. I have a green wall in my room. You may have seen it there. There's a large green curtain. I use chroma key, just like the weatherman. And I'll tell you what, the kids love giving live reports from inside the Coliseum. Okay, and you have to walk that line when you're using technology with kids between what's new and shiny and novel and what's actually making learning better. And it's a very fine line to walk. Okay, the best example I can use is I teach vocabulary in both my social science and my language arts class. So what's the time and true way? Make flashcards, right? Okay, nothing wrong with flashcards. And I remember the teacher next to me, we had gotten, right when we had these new tablets, laptop tablets, there was this flashcard program on there. So these kids were making flashcards. It took them twice as long as to do them on paper. She's like, well, look, it's cool. But how is it any different than doing them on a note card? You've wasted more time, and the kid can't take the computer home. Give them a rubber band, they can take the flashcards home. Okay? So the question you have to ask yourself is it making learning easier? Is it making your job more efficient? And in some cases it is. I mean, word processing. How much time has that saved language arts teachers? I still remember handwriting and rewriting, and I was right in the end of the typewriter era. I do remember using a typewriter when I was in 6th grade, one time, okay? But as I said there though, technology has to be used. If you have it available to you, you have to use it. If you think about a doctor, they have to use the latest and greatest tools and techniques or else they're failing as a doctor. If you have tools at your disposal that can make learning easier and better for your kids as a teacher and you're not using them, then you are failing your students and yourself. Okay? The world is moving in technology. Our schools have to reflect that. Okay? And we're always about a step and a half behind. Why? 2 reasons, I think. Ignorance and fear. And we're fear of what we're ignorant of. Okay? And that'll lead into teacher use, which is where I'm going to spend a little bit of time. Okay? The first thing is bright and shiny. And I use the interactive whiteboards, smart boards, Promethean boards, whatever you want to call it. In most cases, they're just a glorified chalkboard. Okay? How are you using it? Well, it's interactive. Just because interactive is in the title of the product doesn't mean it's interactive. Okay, who's it interactive for? Well, I can go up and write on it. Yeah, but what are the 29 kids in the seats doing? Well, Joey can go up and write on it. Yeah, but what about the other 28 kids in the room? So when you think about things like that, we often go off and buy all these things because we think it's the latest and greatest, but when it boils down to it, I was just fine with my chalkboard and my chalk. Now, is there some great ways to use interactive whiteboards? Yes, I pick on them because they're being held up as the holy grail of instructional tools, and they're really not in most classrooms. And I have teachers in my building, I'll tell them to. You know you don't even need that. You have a $3,000 chalkboard in your room, and if you've experienced this, you know what I'm talking about. So always be careful of the bright and shiny. The next thing that technology allows us to do is flip our classroom. How many of you have heard of this concept? It's been kind of a buzzword as of late, okay? Partially in thanks to a guy by the name of Salman Khan, the Khan Academy. Math teachers, if you don't know him, I would look him up. You've heard of him, okay. I don't like Salman Khan. I'm going to tell you why. He is doing some remarkable things. For those of you who don't know who he is, he was an engineer, very brilliant man. Okay? And I think it was his cousins. He had some younger cousins that were struggling with math. I don't even know what they were doing. Okay, I don't teach math. And so he made these tutorials, kind of like a screen capture. He was doing math problems and making little short clips, like a YouTube clip, and then emailing that to his cousins and helping with their math homework. And they became more elaborate, and he started building this library of math instructional videos. Okay? And they are some phenomenal videos. And about last year, Bill Gates jumped on the bandwagon and said, this is going to revolutionize teaching. All of our teachers should make these videos, send them home, and the kids can learn from a computer. I have a problem with that. We're human, they're human. They need that connection. Okay? But there's a lot of classroom teachers, and science is a big one that's using this model. They're videotaping labs, posting their videos on YouTube. Kids are watching the videos at home. Okay? 10-minute clips is kind of the magic number a lot of them have been using. And then when they come into class, they've already done the lab at home. So when they come into class, it's more time for discussion, reflecting, and kind of diving a little bit deeper. In theory, sounds great, doesn't it? Okay? But I have reservations. What about the kid that doesn't have internet access at home? What about that kid whose parents are both working and he has to take care of his younger siblings? Okay? It sometimes creates more of a divide in our populations than it allows. However, I have used it to a certain small degree, and I'm going to show you an example of it. And it'll take a minute to load, I'm sure. Okay. I teach social science, and we do a whole host of history stuff. Okay. And what I was noticing is leading up to assessments, and you've probably seen this, if a kid's taking a test, they're not prepared. Well, did you take your notes home and study? Well, yeah. Then you look at their notes and you're like, oh, okay, I understand why you didn't do so well. Okay, which is also a reflection on me. So what I started doing is, and this is a positive use of the smartboard. Here's one, okay, is I would have the smartboard and I would be doing a review the day before the test or a couple of days before the test. And I'd be writing notes, or in this case, I'm filling out a graphic organizer on the Roman Republic. And then there's a free tool, we're all about free in our line of work, called Screencast-O-Matic, and it essentially allows me to screen capture everything on my screen, as well as my voice. So I have my laptop, it's got a little microphone. And here's the end product.
Today we're going to take a look at the Roman Republic.
I'm not going to play the whole thing.
In ancient Rome. The chart here represents the different parts of the Roman Republic.
I'm just going to scoot forward because you don't really.
That are patricians. There are two of them, and they served a term of 1
So the John Madden pen?
And the reason behind that is they thought if they served 1-year terms, they were less likely to be corrupt, and it would constantly keep the government and the people running the government.
Okay, so you get the idea. That's my voice, and I am dragging things into this chart, I'm annotating it. I post this to YouTube. It's a 6-minute video. Maybe, actually this one might be even shorter than that. So now when a kid's studying at home, they can go to this. They can review at home, they can hit pause, rewind anytime they want. Is this powerful? Yes. Okay, does this replace me? I hope not. There's a quote floating around, if robots can replace you as a teacher, then maybe they should. Okay? But this is a powerful tool. Kids don't typically have access to these things at home. They don't have access to you at home. Okay? So this is something that I have seen as a happy medium between Khan Academy and everybody learn at home and at school will just review. I don't know about that, okay? The next big area that I'm going to briefly touch on is blogging, okay? I'm going to ask, does anybody here blog? A couple of you. Educationally related? Okay, good. I started blogging about 1.5 years ago, and it has been the second most influential thing in my development as a teacher, okay? Ahead of my master's and my national board certification, okay? And every time I say that, there's some national board certified teachers that go, really? Really? And I say that without hesitation, okay? Why would I say that? Well, when I blog, I share things that happen in my class, and I have people that rip me apart. I have people that tear me down and cause me to question the very things I do in my class on a day-to-day basis. How can you not be better as a result of that? Okay, now there's some people that don't have thick enough skin. They can't take that. There's some people that frankly don't want to know how bad they are or the things that they're doing that aren't maybe as good. It takes a leap of faith to put yourself out there. But I don't care. Go ahead and tell me I'm bad, and then I can make steps to improve it. And blogging has allowed me to do that. Now, I also read a lot of blogs. Okay, I know what's going on in classrooms around this country right now today. I know that a teacher in Wisconsin, Miss Rip, in her class, what she's doing right now in her 4th grade class, because I've connected with her through her blog. Okay, and it's an outlet for a teacher. Too often our profession is defined by the media. It's like a 4-letter word. Okay, blogging is the one media that a teacher has that, guess what? You control it. Newspapers write stories about teachers from their vantage point and what sells. Blogging is one of those places. I have 12,000 people that read my blogs on an average month. That's a lot of people. They're hearing my story from my perspective, good or bad, but it's my story. You know, I was recently in a conference, and when I post this eventually on YouTube, he's going to catch wind of it and get mad at me. This guy was talking to all the other teachers of the year from all the different states, and he went through and basically created this doomsday perspective on blogging and social media, the dangers. I was like, I'm listening to a fire and brimstone preacher here. And he's wrong. Teachers, the only voice you have is your own. And if you let somebody else talk for us, which is what's happening. Hey, Jon Stewart had a great bit on Arnie Duncan. Anybody see Jon Stewart and Arnie Duncan? We can't rely on Jon Stewart and Matt Damon, who was great, pardon the language, if you haven't seen that. We can't rely on them to tell the stories of educators. We have to be more vocal as a profession. Or guess what? The things we complain about now are the same things that we're going to be complaining about in 30 years and in 50 years. Okay? And blogging is one of those tools. And the next one, and I tell you, I'll get to my roles, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, okay? I still remember sitting in a session at a tech conference, and this teacher, he was a teacher in one of the Glenbard schools, and he was talking about Twitter. And I said, dude, I'm not LeBron James or Kim Kardashian. Why would I use Twitter? And I thought he was out of his mind. Twitter is the #1 thing that would be on my list that has allowed me to grow as a professional. Hands down. What? Twitter has allowed me to connect to teachers around the world. Literally. Okay? When I was talking about that hole in the wall theory, that professor, I've talked with him on Twitter and shared with him my story. Daniel Pink, that author, I have talked with him because of Twitter. Okay? Yes, you're all going to roll your eyes, and that's fine. I get it. I did the same thing. Okay? But I promise you, if there's one thing that a teacher can do to be better at what they're doing, it's get on Twitter. Because you can connect with teachers around the world and learn more in an hour and a half on there than an entire master's degree. And I don't hesitate to say that. And half of you are going to go try it and give it about a week and give up on it. And of that half, about a quarter of you might stick with it, and you will come back in a year and say you were right. And the other half are going to say, all right, when are we out of here? Okay? But trust me, it is amazing. And if I have time, I'll show you just a clip on that. So a few of my favorite things, tech-wise, for me as a teacher, allow me to do my job easier. I already said it, Twitter, okay? Evernote's one that I have become quite a fan of lately. Anybody familiar with Evernote? It's fabulous. If you are like me and you use Internet Explorer, or you used to, because that's what the district had on your laptop, and you have 47,000 bookmarks, come on, you know who you are, okay. And then when something goes wrong and you lose them, you feel like the world has ended. I don't remember that site. Kind of like if you lose your cell phone, you don't know anybody's phone number, okay? Evernote is a great site where, okay, you're on your computer, you come across this great resource. You put it in your Evernote trunk, as it's called. It's a web application. It's free. It's in the cloud. You save things up to it. You organize it in folders. It's like having a giant filing cabinet up in the wherever that stuff is, okay? And you can send stuff to it. When I am at a conference taking notes, I take notes on it. It shows up, it throws up to this Evernote place, my account. And I can get to it on any computer, no matter where I am. I use it on my phone. Sometimes I put my grocery list on it, okay? So it's something to work at. Screencast-O-Matic, I put that on there, especially you math people. If you're doing problems and you have a smartboard, I highly suggest it. Make a YouTube channel, which is the next one. Put some of those problems up there. It's so useful for kids to be able to see that at home because they don't have access to you at home. And if their parents are like me, when my kid gets to junior high math, they're out of luck. Okay? They're out of luck. In Google Docs and Google Reader and anything that Google touches, I suggest you use. Okay? Google Forms. Anybody played around with Google Forms? Oh my gosh, talk about 30 seconds to make a survey and get feedback from a kid. It's very nice. And then Google Reader is just an RSS feed, which is foreign language, some of you understand. It's all the blogs I subscribe to come to my Google Reader. So I don't have to go out and find them all. It goes to one place. Okay? And again, I could talk about all of these for hours, but I'm not going to because we don't have time. So I'm going to end with some questions that I get mixed reactions on, and that's okay. Too often teachers follow the status quo. We teach the way we were taught, we get our tenure, and hopefully there's a retirement at the end of the tunnel. And that's how we go through our lives. And so there's some questions that I have begun to ask myself. And the first one I kind of touched on is grades. And this is something I challenge a lot of you to think about. What does a grade mean in your class? Is the grade in your class purely based upon your student's ability to understand and master a learning standard? I could not have said that 5 years ago, because if a kid turned an assignment late, I took 50% off. If a kid brought me in a Kleenex box, I gave him 2 points of extra credit. Okay? We laugh, but we all do it. So when you look at a grade at the end of the term, an A in my class is not going to mean the same as an A in your class. Think about how confusing that is for a kid. Think about how confusing it is for a parent. In a perfect system, you have a grade that's based purely on academic achievement. That's it. And then you have a grade based on all those other things that I think are behaviors. You're going to penalize a kid for turning in the work late. Is that grade now reflective of their learning or their behavior or their ability to comply to your wishes? So I ask you to look at what your grades mean. What role do parents play? I'll admit to you, my first year, I was like, if I can make it through this whole year with only having to talk to that parent twice, fall conferences and spring conference, we're doing good. And then I had a kid of my own, and he went to preschool. And every month they did parents in the classroom. And I got to go in and play and learn with my son. And I started thinking, why in the world do we not do this beyond preschool? Yeah, we have the moms come and do the Valentine's Day party. My wife just did that. But are you doing anything productive with the learning environment of the class? No. So I started doing parents in the classroom this year. My colleagues looked at me like I was insane. You don't want that mom is crazy. You don't want her coming in your classroom. But you know what? I opened the doors. And every one of them, from the best parent in the world to the ones you would look at as the worst parent. But guess what? They were there and they supported their kid. And isn't that what it's about? And I've done it 3 or 4 times this year. I've been out too much, so it's been tough. And sometimes I had kids working on a project. I want their kids to work with their parents. I want their parent to see how they work. And one time they were doing an online game, and I wanted them to show how they interact with the technology for the parents. And so after the first one, I sent a feedback form out to the parents, a Google form. So what'd you think of this? Is this worth my time? Is it worth your time? Because this was in the middle of the morning. I teach, first, second, and third period. So some of these parents were taking off work or going in later, whatever it was. And this one comment this one mother made to me stuck with me. And she said, "Thank you so much, because I have felt that schools go out of their way to avoid parents walking through those doors." Okay? Now, yes, they go in and drop their lunch off because Johnny forgot it. But when do they actually get invited to sit in your classroom and learn with their kid? Now, I don't suggest you do this every day. Okay? But I will also tell you that the behavior on those days is fantastic. Okay? So I do it once a month, or I try to do it once a month. And it has been great for building that relationship with them. It also shows the kid that, guess what? Mom and Dad care about what I'm doing in school. They're here. And it embarrasses the heck out of a 6th grade boy. I even had a kid. My mom's not coming in. No, bud, she's coming. Gosh, do I have to sit with her? Yes, you do. It's tough. And then I've kind of mentioned this before, is do you teach the way you were taught? And I would say I did my first couple of years. And I recently listened to this presenter, and his name escapes me and I forget, but he was saying within the first 3 years of a teacher's career, they get into a rut and they never get out. Majority of teachers. They are teaching the same their 3rd year of teaching as they are in their 30th year. And I'll use a really bad example. I have a teacher. I won't go into great detail to identify this teacher. She teaches a certain subject area that I won't go into, and is a big fan of packets. Packets. 4-letter word in my book. Packets and worksheets. And this kid brings a packet into my study hall and he's working on it. I kind of look at it, almost looked like the old dittos. I was like, wait a minute. So I said, let me look at that. Copyright date, 1974. And I went, all right. So, being the smart, I wanted to do something about this. I brought it up in a very discreet manner to this teacher. So the following year, same packet, but she got a Sharpie and marked it out. And we laugh, but this is happening all over. Okay? We assume that because we were taught that way, hey, we turned out all right. It can't be bad. Kids are changing. The way kids learn, the way we understand how kids learn is changing. Kids do not learn sitting in desks, quiet, row after row after row, being lectured to, as I'm doing to you today. It doesn't work that way, and yet we keep forcing kids into these boxes. So just because that was the way you were taught, doesn't make it necessarily applicable to today. Our kids are changing. The world is changing. We have to reflect that in here, or we're setting our kids up for failure, as we know how many kids are dropping out of college, how many kids are going into college and can't hack it, but they're very good on bubble tests. They're very good at bubble tests. Okay, and another one that I get a lot of heat about is homework. I don't assign it, I don't believe in it. I think it is a negative in education today. Nobody booed. Okay. And let me tell you why. When you assign homework, you lose control of the learning. I have kids that go home to amazing families by the traditional definition of a family. Mom and Dad are there, we're sitting at the kitchen table, we're doing a homework together, Mom's making a lovely home-cooked meal, and it works. But then I have that kid that goes home to an apartment with 4 other families, with 13, 14 kids in the house, many of whom that in the junior high, they're taking care of younger siblings or cousins. Internet, what's that? And yet I expect the same product to come back from all of those kids. Does that seem right? Does that seem fair? No, it doesn't. And so it creates a system, a cyclical problem, because those kids that aren't doing the homework aren't getting that learning because they're missing that at home, which to me, if you're forcing learning at home, then you're not doing your job as a teacher. They come into your class, now they're not prepared for that test, so they're going to, it's a cycle. Okay? And everybody says, well, homework teaches responsibility and respect and all those things. Have you looked at the research? It doesn't. I'll reference another book. Alfie Kohn, The Homework Myth. Read it. If you are a homework stalwart, we have to have homework, it's something we need. Read it. Be challenged. Think about it. Okay? Who are you watching teach? How many of you have ever went and watched a colleague teach? Just for the heck of it. Not very many. Some of you have. Good. A couple of years ago, we started this. During our plan periods, we'd go sit and watch people teach. I went and sat and watched the band teacher teach. That was awesome. And it's also interesting to see how kids act in other classes. That's always fun. We can learn so much by the people sitting in this room. And yet, how many times are doors closed? How many times do we never let people in our room? Or as soon as somebody walks in, we go, oh, everything's okay in here. What are you doing in here? Okay. Or, oh, I better put on that dog and pony show. All right, kids, you know the drill. Okay. And we see it. And administrators, I'm going to challenge the administrators. When was the last time you were in a classroom and taught? How often are you in a classroom? Because, in my opinion, the only way you can make decisions about what's best for kids is be in the classroom with them. And that's a challenge I'm fighting with my current administration. And there's a guy, administrators, I'm going to drop a name, John Carver. He's a principal in Van Meter, Iowa, or he's a superintendent. He goes and teaches classes and observes. His administrative team did 1,400 observation drop-in walkthroughs last school year alone. They have an understanding of what's going on in a class. And I'm not condemning anybody, I'm just using an example here. But administrators we need in classrooms. Teachers, you need to be in other people's classrooms. I'm not saying you sit through the whole period. Stop in, see how do they start class? And we have to create that culture of collegiality that we can do that and not freak out and think it's a dog and pony show. Because I know my first year, administrators coming in 3 times a year. You know what my best 3 lessons were? Is that normal? Is that natural? Of course it is. Now come in any time. I don't care. All right? And then the last point I have is kind of back to the front end is how does our school, how do our classes reflect the world? And that's not just technology, but the way we interact. Okay, there's a lot going on in the world that these kids are going to walk into that you and I didn't have when we grew up. They're experiencing things that we didn't have to experience. That's a reality. And we have 2 choices. We can ignore it. We can try to sanitize it for them when they're here, but that just sets them up for failure when they leave. You know, we look at all the amount of stuff we censor and block in our schools. Are we actually protecting the kids or are we protecting ourselves? And so what I hope, if nothing else, I've raised some, and if I've upset a couple of you, good. Because honestly, that's where we find the most growth. The most disappointing and disagreeing arguments I've ever had are actually the ones I've walked away going, you know what? That person was right, or it's caused me to think of something in a different way. So, I ask you to make sure and do everything you can to make sure your classes and your schools reflect the world that these kids are going to be living in.